Hey everybody, it's Master Gallengeist here, bringing you my review for the latest episode of his Dark Materials, The Spies. And this was a pretty good episode. It got us more into the kind of Egyptian realm and kind of a little bit of the inner workings. We actually got some interesting character development on Ma Costa and her link to Lyra, and another kind of good bit that went throughout this was kind of looking at and seeing things that we learn about Mrs. Coulter throughout this. It really deepens her character and it just gave me chills kind of seeing her on screen because that facade is kind of away, and seeing what she tries to do to get Lyra back and how she's kind of acting was kind of scary. It's like, okay, this is a woman that, from what we have seen before, was barely kind of holding it together with some kind of control, and this person is just like teetering and tottering throughout. Still trying to do her objectives and everything, but one wrong push, and this woman is not to be fucked with. Other bits that we got was Boreal and his whole kind of thing with the whole parries, and we got a lot of interesting movement there, more so than I thought that we were going to get, because usually we don't get into what's going on with the other realms and other worlds until like the second book. But I like how they're kind of setting this up. At first I'm like, all right, how's this going to be kind of played? And seeing how they're kind of laying it out works very well, and I'm kind of interested to see how it's going to just kind of tie up together. So we start off the episode and we see that Lyra is actually rescued by Tony and Benjamin. And it's like, oh, okay, that worked out pretty well because they were able to kind of figure out what's going on with the gobblers and actually capture one of them. So it's like, that's good. And we see that she's like pretty leery. Everything that she's kind of gone through, she has very little trust for a lot of people anymore because, let's see, she trusted the college and they let her go off with Mrs. Coulter, and she trusted Mrs. Coulter and got into that whole kerfuffle. Who should she be able to trust? Honestly, her being like questioning everything at this point and wanting to know the truth throughout this episode is the most logical course of action for her. Even if she's a kid, it's like there's some weird stuff going on. Well, and just seeing her kind of come to terms with that was kind of cool as she's going through and pretty much trying to figure out if she should be able to trust John Fa and the rest of the crew going out through there. And she's like, well, I'm a prisoner, aren't I? And he's like, no, you're not, even though she can't leave. Granted, there is a little bit of more nuance there, but for all intents and purposes, in her view, she is a prisoner because she can't leave and she can't go and do what she wants to do of helping find Roger and everything. Granted, it might seem like it's a one-track kind of mind for her, but it really isn't. Roger is a very pivotal part of her character and her friend, and she wants to help her friend. It really fits with her, even though we have to be like, she has to keep bringing it up, mainly because the adults don't fucking listen to her, and that's kind of how kids get their shit across sometimes. Of, hey, please help. While this is going on, Mrs. Coulter actually goes to Jordan College and starts ripping everything apart to try and find Lyra, thinking, oh, she probably went back there. Not a bad deduction on her part, but her own Gobbler squad pretty much got to her before then. And seeing her kind of doing her power play of saying, hey, find anything heretical or whatnot, making it up, it's like, oh, authoritarianism. That's a cool kind of thing. As she kind of has her pissing contest with the master and being like, the master's like, listen, you're the one who lost her. I entrusted character to you. You're bad. Your fault. And of course, they're able to find the books that allow people to read the alethiometers. And she's like, ooh, yeah, why do you have that? Since you shouldn't have an alethiometer kind of thing. And he's like, whatever, it's academic text. And her bringing up that, oh, scholarly privilege shouldn't be a thing. Like, if it's so important, you should be able to hide it more effectively and be able to protect it more effectively. It's like, right, said as someone who hasn't had that stuff infringed upon before. It's like, or likes to utilize their own control to keep it that way. It's like, all right. So she pretty much gets no help from him and decides to rip the place apart and everything. And it really hurt me seeing her go through and like ripping pages out of books and just tossing them into a fire. It's like, fuck that shit. It's bullcrap. So she pretty much leaves that in disarray. It of course brings kind of trouble into the magisterium and everything going on there. Boreal, of course, being questioned of what's going on because Mrs. Coulter went off the handle and pretty much fucked up that shit, even though it's like, hey, we kind of need that whole scholarly protection thing to at least keep up appearances and everything. Yeah. As one dude is pretty much relating it to Boreal, being like, you kind of want to keep her in check because she's going to get some consequences. I'm like, I'll deal with consequences too. So he then kind of goes off to kind of figure out what's going on, mainly in the other world, and then at some point does link back up with Mrs. Coulter because the Egyptians are trying to figure out what to do next. Lyra is not as forthcoming with the whole operation base in the north because I guess she didn't get a good enough look to be like, hey, they got some kind of weird shit going on in the north. She does later in the episode, but of course she's kind of learning how to be with the Egyptians and all that and figure out what's going on. They do have a thing that went on where the Magisterium did a surprise check of the Egyptian boats and Lyra had to hide. Pretty much that's it. She did get some good bonding time with Ma Costa, helping her in the kitchen and learning tricks and everything. And Lyra's asking if she's going to have to become Egyptian. She's like, no, you can be whatever you want. It's like, okay. We do get some more of like Ma Costa actually being a parent and more of a character because her up until this point had just been lamenting the fact that her son had been taken and that had kind of just been it. Granted, this helps morph her into more of a character, seeing, okay, she knows all this Egyptian stuff, she knows how to be a mom, and Lyra really hasn't had a mom. The only mom figure that she had went pretty much batshit. And after the whole thing where she's pretty much trying to ascertain the truth, she does have a confrontation with Ma Costa where she learns that Mrs. Coulter was her mother, and well, is her mother. And all the implications that implies that Mrs. Coulter and Lord Asriel had an affair, and that eventually Mrs. Coulter's husband found out about it and went to go kill Lyra and got killed in a fight between himself and Lord Asriel. And then, of course, the Egyptian woman that was taking care of Lyra at that point was Ma Costa. And that's how it kind of brings them a little bit together, having them a little bit of history. And Lyra at that point had been screaming about, hey, I need to know the truth and everything. And it's like, yeah, there you go. And while this is going on, we cut between certain things of Mrs. Coulter acting drunk and everything and looking like she's going to throw herself off a ledge before she kind of drunkenly stumbles to this box and lets loose these spy flies, which are like crazy and they are not sanctioned by the Magisterium. So using them, there's going to be consequences for that probably. We'll have to see. But that goes on through the episode until it gets into its pertinent part. We do see that Benjamin and Tony decide to go in the middle of the night to get more information on what's going on in the north. So they break into Mrs. Coulter's place. Lyra, of course, was able to give them the information that her stuff was in the study. They're able to get in. They get some of the stuff going on, and during this, Mrs. Coulter's demon pops up, freaks out. Tony is able to get away, but Benjamin gets shot by Mrs. Coulter with a gun that she shouldn't have been able to really fire like that. Now, granted, I didn't get a good enough look at this revolver, but it was a fucking cannon, and I'm like, okay. But she shoots him and pretty much does this crazy kind of ape-like, monkey-like hitting on him, really mirroring what the demon's doing and to his bird demon. It's like, that's interesting to see them juxtaposed like that and seeing how they kind of measure up with each other. It's really disconcerting to see her acting like that and saying, "Oh, I can make your stuff so horrible and everything," as the demon's trying to pretty much apply pressure on Benjamin's demon, but he's able to get away from her, says, "I'm not going to betray my family," and throws himself down the elevator shaft that they used to get in and get the information. And Mrs. Coulter looks just pissed off. This, of course, leads to more security when Boreal comes in to kind of talk to her when the whole spy flies kind of gets more into effect. In between these, we get that Boreal has gone into the other world, and it's kind of interesting because, granted, usually I would say that certain things that were kind of focused on, especially that his wheel was kind of locked because of like parking violations, but it's interesting because he's not top dog in this world, so it's effective in showing that, like, yeah, you have to think about what you're doing, but he's able to get out of it, meet up with his contact, and get more information on the Perrys, learning about, of course, the son and the wife, and getting some people onto them. And we do see a picture of the son, Perry, and that he's going to be kind of focused on by the Magisterium's efforts, at least in this world. So it's like, okay, that's a nice way to kind of bring that in, since it's a little bit later in the next book that he is introduced more as a character, and bringing up different kind of things because he's talking to his contact that had gotten him the information, like, well, what about like the nature of demons? It's like, oh, this dude actually came from this world and went into yours, and kind of like putting up the whole kind of exploratory aspect of how the dude he's been talking to is more of a coward and won't actually do that, but I stepped through, and so did Perry, so we have to kind of figure out what's going on there, because he's like, wait a minute, I thought you said that we didn't have demons. I was like, or he thought that we didn't have demons. I was like, wait a minute, if he could go over and have a demon, ooh, what does that mean? It's like, hey, interesting, and kind of fleshing out some more and all that. But the biggest kind of aspect we got was that the Egyptians have decided to go to war with the Magisterium and go to the north and try and get their children back. We do get a scene that felt kind of, I mean, I know they needed the big scene of like John Fa pretty much calling upon all of the people and being like, we need to go and save our children, and we had one dude who's like trying to do a persuasion to not go and do this, but it's like the weakest argument. You've pretty much got really good evidence that your children are up north, they're in this weird, pretty much kind of prison complex, and you've got to go and get them. Marshal your forces and go for it. Get them. I mean, I understand that it's they could have maybe done a little bit better, but it was kind of cut and dry of like, they've taken our children. We got to go get our children. So we get them being like, all right, let's go and do this. We get that Lyra is pretty much talking with the second in command and just figuring out some kind of things, if she can trust him, if she can trust the Egyptians, talking about the nature of demons kind of settling and all that, and how Lyra doesn't want hers to settle, but he's like, hey, I wouldn't change anything about my demon, even though, like, he'd probably want it to be a different form or whatnot, but you kind of settle into certain things. I like this conversation because when they're talking about it, you're kind of seeing, okay, Lyra kind of wants to be changeable and adaptable to different situations, kind of wanting, like, Pan can do that and help her out. Whereas sometimes people just get stuck in certain roles in certain ways and don't think about any other kind of way to kind of do that. At least that's what I got from it. And I don't know, there could be other interpretations, but it was kind of nice to see that kind of conversation going on. However, the spy flies do pop up and see Lyra, and they are able to capture one, but one goes off and tells, well, we don't know about tells, but does get to Ms. Coulter with the information of Lyra and all that, while Boreal's there and she's got extra security in her wing. It's like, okay, this is going to be kind of interesting. But at that point, the Egyptians have pretty much loaded everybody up on their ship to sail north, and we get another kind of thing with Lyra and Ma Costa, where Lyra was going to throw the spy fly into the ocean. But Malakas is like, hey, keep it for sentimental reasons. For like, hey, your mother sent it after you because even if she loves you, like she sent it in love to try and find you, or in hate, it's still a thing from your mother. I kind of get that, but that's more of my opinion of something that would bite you in the ass later. Now, also an important bit is that the Egyptians brought up the witches of the north and trying to get them on their side and get their support. So that's another political faction that's going to be moving into these realms, and we're going to have to figure out how they're going to react to the Egyptians and how they're going to like help Lyra and everything. And that's pretty much what we've got in this episode. Last big thing that we saw was that Lyra was able to figure out how to use the alethiometer, pretty much going into a Zen state and asking it and using these symbols, because we'd seen that John Fa and, of course, Mrs. Coulter and the Master talking about how you need these certain books to understand these symbols of the alethiometer, but Lyra didn't need that. She was able to kind of figure out the symbols on her own and figure out that Benjamin was dead right as the information was reaching them, as Tony came back with all the information needed for the Egyptians to pretty much plot their course to the north and continue on with the central arc of the story. So, yeah, this was enjoyable with seeing how Lyra reacts to all the information that she's been given, how that kind of affects her journey of trying to help and save Roger and the rest of the people, how the Egyptians are going to be dealing with the Magisterium, and how the Magisterium is trying to orchestrate their own power struggles of not just this world, but any other worlds as well. So I'm intrigued to kind of see what happens next and how this kind of gets to the conclusion at the end of the season. So those are my opinions on the episode. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.